Hello everyone. Hopefully the sound is coming through just well. Just fine. That's what I mean, of course. I'm trying to make sure that all my captions are working. They should be. So hopefully you're seeing closed captions if you need them. It looks like everything is working on my end. So as long as everything is working on your end, all is good. All is great. All is wonderful. And if for some reason my sound is not coming through, just let me know in the chat. But it looks like everything is active. Everything is good. This is what I call a good time. I am your Saturday night welcome to book night. Now, I realize that we don't actually get into books as often as we do other things, like art and film. A little sip because I'm about to be talking for a while, so do bear with me. We have a slightly different setup today, from the camera to the lighting, even how the microphone is set up, because I want to make sure that my words come through very clear. Hi over there on Twitch. Now, of course, first off, a quick visual descriptor. I have long brown hair, glasses. I am here in my studio and library. I'm wearing a wonderful lipstick that was actually gotten for me. It was a gift from my best friend. Wonderful little set, actually, of lipsticks, and I really like them. We have a bluish purple light tonight. And I have my necessary cuppa, because, of course, sometimes you need to have a little drink nearby. In this case, we're actually having some coffee to go with book night. Now, before we get too far in, just a couple other things. I'm coming to you through Restream, which is an absolutely wonderful software. Restream allows me to come to you across multiple platforms all at once. So today we are on YouTube and Twitch concurrently. Nowhere else, at least for today. Thank you so much in chat. Yes, I have my painting from last week's stream up behind me. Due to the lighting, you can't really see it quite right, but it's pretty nice. I like having it back there. I like being able to display them when we're on and doing other things. And yes, the microphone is right up here. I wanted the absolute best sound possible today. Because I'm going to be reading to all of you, and I don't want to have any words drop out, and I definitely want to make sure that the captions are as clear as possible. That is wonderful to hear. Thank you so much. We always have the best people in chat. Best person. And I'm always happy to be able to share this time with you. So we're going to talk a little bit. There is going to be a trigger warning for tonight, because I am going to be talking about the Great Web, and I'm going to be reading from my novel, Without the Light, Volume 1, Penance and Toil. Now, because there are subjects in it which might be considered sensitive material, I do want to lead up with the trigger warning. I know that it was on my opening screen, but I would like to say it again. And just be aware that as fantasy goes, sometimes you get into touchy territory. And Without the Light has a lot of personal meaning to me. as does the Great Web and all the characters involved. So there are issues that might come up that are based off either personal experience or people I've known, or issues which could be considered sensitive subject matter. So bear in mind this is of course fiction, but these also represent opinions and fantasy. So when they broach touchy subjects, if you want to blank out for a minute or two, that's perfectly understandable. But thank you for the emotes over there. Thank you so much. Yeah. Oh, goodness. Give me a smile right from the start. That's a good way to get this going, isn't it? Now, between the ring light, the microphone, a number of other things going on right now, the atmosphere is wonderful. The sound is wonderful, but also our ability to dive into what the Great Web is, and the mood and the feelings and the atmosphere of it. It's all quite perfect for this at the moment. So let me just give you a little bit of backstory before we start the story and describe kind of the concept of how the Great Web began. Now, the Great Web has been something that I've been working on now for many years, over a decade. I try to piece together the timestamps on documents and notebooks and things to understand where it began properly. And then I realized that even though I might have one story from 2006, another from 2009, another from 2010, and then a first publication date for any of these books in 2018, there's an anomaly here, and that's that the Great Web, it doesn't have a singular start time, and it doesn't have a singular origin. It's representative of feelings and experiences and times and places, points in my life, and highs and lows, darkness and moments where I did not think there would be any light, any silver lining, any good times. And the Great Web was a way to frame that, to understand it, to escape it, to escape those dark moments. But it also became an exercise in understanding. And part of that understanding was trying to understand how other people experience the world and how other people see the world. And also trying to understand the world around me. We're expected, and expectations can be a slippery slope, but, and kind of a dirty word there, but we're expected to figure life out, not all of us, but many of us, on our own. When we become adults, legally speaking, there's a societal pressure to have our things put together, to get our lives on track. I don't think it works like that. I don't think it can. Those expectations put pressures on us that we might spend the next quarter of our life trying to live up to or escape. And there's an injustice to that. There's an injustice to the way the world works, legally, societally, in regards to family, friendships, education, opportunity. And in a very basic way, the Great Web turned into a framework to display injustice on a mass scale, to explain that it wasn't just our culture, our society, or our lives that were unjust or unfair. It was the universe at large. The universe at large was unfair and sometimes hostile and could take a toll on us. And it wasn't until these ideas coalesced and took firm root that the Great Web and what it was truly became a whole, a complete picture, an entire setting, and a character in itself. Now, I'm a little older than when I originally started this, and I can say that I don't quite feel as grim about the world anymore. I don't quite have that same pressure. I do still see injustice, and I do still see things that are fundamentally wrong, but I disagree with the basis of natural law that the Great Web follows. And hopefully that's how the world actually is. A more kind, just, and balanced place. But the escapism of being able to put all of that darkness and all of that hardship into a firmament and spin stars and worlds and peoples beyond us into a fantastical landscape. Oh my goodness gracious, that makes me excited and happy, because creating stories, telling tales, making heroes' journeys, and weaving the various relationships and threads together. I have such a good time doing it. So, whether you're watching this now or whether you're watching this sometime in the future, I encourage you wholeheartedly to weave together any threads of story that you wish. To embrace things, even things that might be completely opposed to the way you think or feel, or to fully embrace the way you do think and feel right now, and to codify it and solidify it and forge your own worlds. And before we carry on, just so you know, there will be a link, depending on where you're joining me, somewhere nearby, that you can click on if you would like to get a copy of Without the Light Volume 1. It is available in ebook, paperback, and hardcover. And I just so happen to have the paperback right here with me. And we're going to dive into this. Generally, when I read this on a live, I don't read very far. But we're going to read till the end of the show, the normal time, or close to it. Because that might be the best introduction that I can give, and perhaps a little more enticing than the blurb on the back of a book or on a listing on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And before I forget, before I move on, before I pop this open and we start reading, I hope you're all doing wonderful. Feel free to say hi in the chat if you're here. We've had some wonderful emotes and some wonderful comments already. And also, definitely feel free to share this stream. See if we can't get a couple other people around. Let's all listen and let's all enjoy together. I like to listen to my stories, even though I wrote them. There's an aspect of experiencing it all over again once I start reading. Just going to hold this right up here. Of days forgot and moments half remembered, what can be said? The world in all its complications slogs along with nary a complete thought on meaning or substance. People are on the whole benumbed by their own internal beliefs and thoughts, so as to never be fully connected nor disconnected from their fellows. Yet in a primitive way they are aware that life has some greater purpose and meaning, albeit a meaning just beyond their ken. The rational men seek meaning in the mathematics of the universe, and the theosophists seek meaning in the individual relationship they have with their personal gods. In the past, though, it is said, gods walked amongst men. Centuries have passed since the days of grand adventure and epic heroes, but still their tales linger on. It can be known with some clarity that these mythic days are not strung like beads in an unending thread, but that great expanses fester like chasms wide between each legendary jewel of history. Men might not be meant for such greatness that so few have achieved. This could be a principal reality of the nature of things, but perhaps not. Of days forgot and moments half remembered, what can be said? All things come to an end. Life flickers out, memories fade, empires fall, history is lost, and worlds eventually cease to be. But what of time? Perhaps even time must end. Prologue. In New York there is a county called New Amsterdam, and within that county is the town of Overmarsh, an hour north of Fairmount and just to the east of Oswego. There in that town is a village called Middlefield, which is little more than churches and farms. In a particular house within that village is a family just sitting down for dinner. A mother, a father, a little girl clutching a teddy bear, and 2 cats begging beside the table. They are a picturesque family, happy and without troubles. The father cuts up his daughter's meal, a pot roast and potatoes, for she is too young for the task. The mother sets a small plate of fat and meat on the floor for the loyal and curious cats. All the while, just outside the window, a stranger stares in, a voyeur barely visible within shadowy seclusion. His skin a sickly color and his eyes an intolerable cold black. The fields around the house are alive with acres of wheat that dance lightly in a breeze. Even in the darkness, the world is green and vibrant, yet from somewhere unseen, a swirling line of sand blows along with the gentle wind. The voyeur seems aware of the sand. He sinks away from it. The family, inside the little house in Middlefield, don't see the sand, and they don't see the stranger. The cats inside the house grow alert, and before finishing their meat, they run underneath the little girl's chair. The house becomes darker inside, ever so slightly. The man outside backs away as the sand drifts past him. Even in his cold eyes, there's a twinge of terror. The lights in the house suddenly blink out. A mother screams inside. The sound of cats hissing and fighting can be heard. The voyeur puts a hand over his chest, grasping as if in pain. The moon's rays glisten off what looks like silver on his hands. The clouds move in the sky and the fields are enshrouded. The stranger vanishes from sight. The sand that was riding the wind slowly blows away and is gone. That same evening in the city of Fairmount, a couple walk into an Art Deco building, a grand hotel called the Cromwell. They are both dressed well for the evening. Nice black dress with heels, fancy suit, and shined shoes. The man is pudgy and somewhat short, and his face almost glows with happiness. The woman by his side is, some would say, far lovelier than he deserves. She smiles at him as he takes her hand. They are going to dinner at one of the nicest places in the city. It is their anniversary. They had their first date at the Cromwell. As the two share a drink and wait for a table, a band plays on stage. One man is playing the guitar as another plays the piano, and a third man is singing. The couple find their way to be seated in a booth, far from the stage, but the music is still audible. The server brings them another set of drinks. The couple do not notice the small bit of sand under their feet. Far from their booth, sitting by the stage, a man is watching them. His eyes are cold and his skin is gray. He drums his fingers on the table and seems to be waiting for something. Another stranger is moving towards the table where the couple sits. He moves like the world around him isn't real. He is shrouded in black, robed in darkness. His face elderly but uncannily full of strength. The couple is unaware of the stranger, even though he is standing right beside them now. The power in the hotel goes out without warning. Emergency lights kick on in every hall and within the dining room. Red haze, a specter of illumination, dimly gives sight as the couple share their last moments together. The man looks on in horror. His wife has fallen to the floor. He rushes to the ground to hold her and can see in her face a pain beyond reckoning. He speaks her name, Daria, and she speaks his for the last time, Genevieve. The room is still bathed in red light as a waiter phones an ambulance. The band has stopped playing as a husband cries out. Both strangers are gone, as is the sand. Far from New Amsterdam and far from that night, two men sit by a campfire, the ground around them wreathed in snow. Many small lanterns hanging from the trees, and a tea kettle steams away on a small flat stone slab. One man is garbed in animal pelts and the other in a long double-breasted blue jacket with dozens of silver buttons. In his right hand he holds a brass clepsydra, a water clock, crafted to look like a coiled serpent with many wings. The man in the furs looks on at the clepsydra knowingly, and then looks into the stern green eyes of his companion. Long dark hair is caught by breeze and moves back and forth in front of his eyes. They speak of things in a tongue not known to many. The words, though, are not happy ones, and something grave weighs heavy on both their hearts. The one man hands the clepsydra to the other and says something. The bulk of what he said was indecipherable, but amongst his words was a name, Eridu, and a phrase, the City of Mirrors. The man dressed in pelts took the water clock and hid it below his garments, and the other man stood up and in an instant was gone from sight, as if he had never been there at all. Part 1. The Man in the Red Suit. And once more, I will give a trigger warning here before we move on, just so you are aware. Part 1. The Man in the Red Suit. A room bare of the things normally associated with persons living in a home. Save the myriad of beer cans and empty liquor bottles, the only real consistency in the room is the horrible stained, woven hippie-style rug and an overfilled ashtray planted in the carpet. To add some manner of lively activity, the corner of the room is dedicated to a dismal milk crate entertainment center, fully equipped with a beat-up television and all manner of video games and electronic distractions. A sliding glass door peeks out onto a balcony, overlooking the pestilence of city life. A sky wrought with more gray than blue, and clouds of toxins instead of rain. Beyond the tragedy of the living room, there was a bleak hallway leading down into a kitchen that had all the charm of a prison cafeteria. 2 metal folding chairs framed a solemn card table, and a rusty white refrigerator stood like a titan overpowering the room. The sink and the cupboards gave the distinct impression of having been built for hunchbacks, and the pile of dishes gave guess as the tenant's lack of ambitions. Across from the kitchen was a bedroom that seemed more like a vault for clothing to be heaped up like plundered treasures in a dragon's lair. If it wasn't for the glow of a lava lamp, the room would have been rather ominous. Then, at the very end of the hall, stood the bathroom that time forgot, pinned halfway between a truck stop and a 1950s housing community. It is here where you can see a slowly filling bathtub, and a green-eyed man staring into his reflection. Shirtless, he appears as thin as a corpse and as pale as death. His skin is covered in neat yet vicious cuts from a delicate razor blade. The bleeding lines have a sad and meticulous nature, each group of them made into strange little drawings and words. A diluted series of smiling faces and self-deprecating statements etched into his weakened body. A pair of ratty dress pants clinging to sweaty, weary legs. A yellow cord tied around his bicep, and a sinister needle next to the sink, the only evidence of his self-destructive mission to depart from our reality. A fresh-shaved face and shaggy blonde hair could let him go on amongst us unnoticed, but the burden inside him would always bar away happiness. As soon as the tub was full, he would slide away into nothingness. That was the only plan that made sense to him now. It had been too long since last he felt like life was worth living. The dizzy euphoria had started to fill his veins, and his heart was pumping a numb kind of chemical love into his mind. He pulled off his socks and stepped lightly into the tub. The water was so hot, but he could barely feel it. And honestly, he didn't want to feel it. All he wanted to feel was the water filling his lungs as the poison he shot up with took him into the dream of how he wished life could be. He lowered himself down into the water and laid back so he could see the ceiling. There's only silence as his head goes under the water, and he keeps his eyes open to see everything for this last moment. Under the water, there is only the cavernous sound of his own body moving, and the deep chug of his heart beating along. He would meet his end as he felt he should. Alone. Gracious peace started to sneak into his eyes, and slowly the world is disappearing. First the shapes all start to meld into each other, and then the colors pour out into an unformed sea of light. As he loses grip, the light fades into a poor mockery of the darkness. Now there is nothing. The sound is faded. The darkness even seems to have disappeared. Time itself begins to stretch and distort, and he feels almost confused. Isn't there supposed to be some sort of flash before his eyes? Shouldn't he be shown all the moments of his life and some sort of maddening, fleeting glimpse of what was or what he should have seen all along? There was no nostalgia or meaningful last thoughts. Was he dead? Is he now in some sort of purgatory, or is there nothing after the body dies? What little faith he had is questioned, and he wonders if it was really worth it to die, if death holds no more peace than life did. This can't be all there is. An eternity of nothing but his own thoughts? No, it isn't the end yet, because he still feels the nausea of the drugs. There's still some life left in him, but he knows that he can't fight for his life now because he is already too far gone. He doesn't have the strength or control of his body left to crawl out of the tub. He could try to hold his breath, but then he'd just pass out a little faster. He must still be awake. Sit up. That is all he has to do. He just has to sit up. If he can sit up, then he can lean over the edge of the tub and crawl out onto the floor. That is all he has to do. He just has to tell his body to sit up. All it will take is a little self-control, mind over matter kind of shit. Sit up and crawl out of the tub. He just keeps screaming it in his head. He needs to live because he knows this isn't the way to find peace. He has to sit up and crawl out of the tub. The sudden urge to vomit overtakes him. He can feel the pulpy texture in his mouth and the horrible acidic burn in his throat. As he starts to choke out the mess, his eyes shoot open. There it is. He's awake, but where is he? He darts his eyes around, and all he can see is his sick and a shaky white. Is that the tile floor of the bathroom? His face is pressed against the cold tile with a puddle of acidic ichor surrounding his head. He's on the floor, wet, shaking, violently ill. He doesn't know how he got out of the tub, but he feels some peace in knowing that he is safe now. He feels like well-hammered crap. He's alive and safe. Of course, feeling alive doesn't give him the ambition to get off the floor, but instead he would rather fall asleep here. After all, he's alive and safe, so it doesn't matter where he sleeps. It could be said that Mondays can be hard, but at least he knew that this Monday wouldn't be his last. He would lose himself to the elixir that pushed through his body and awakened to a new day. After all, tomorrow couldn't be any worse than today. His name is Courtney Rubel, and he will live because I haven't chosen now to be his time. His time will come eventually, but for now, I need him. And if you need to know who I am, for now you can know me as the man in the red suit. And I have many things for him to do. I hope everyone is enjoying this. I got something in my eye while I was reading. Introductions. Prying himself up off the floor, his head flooded with the heavy throbbing pain. His mouth and throat felt raw, and he knew that all he needed was a drink, maybe a cup of coffee. He could almost smell the hot metal of his coffee maker brewing away. He used his hands and shoulder to guide him along the wall into the kitchen. For a moment he stopped and gazed in a confused haze. His coffee pot was full of steaming dark roast, and he strained to remember if he set the timer yesterday. He couldn't recall. But it was possible. Yesterday was such a blur of motion and fading pictures. He walked slowly to the pot and stopped as he neared what should have been a counter covered in dishes and mess. Oh, I'm going to take the incoming messages on Twitch for a moment so I can have a sip. I haven't read this long in some time, in just one go. Yes, the introduction of Courtney Rubel is definitely one of the harder introductions in the book. But yes, there's most certainly a trigger warning on this because there's a lot of material that could be very sensitive depending on the audience. So, hopefully, having a trigger warning in the beginning and a couple of stated ones will be helpful for those who have to watch this later. Let us continue. I honestly think that there should probably, the next time I do this, I should just have a little trigger warning graphic in the bottom corner of the screen to just stay there for the whole time. That should probably, I should do that next time. I'll remember. Yesterday was such a blur of motion and fading pictures. Oh, Banneret. Banneret. Yes. Okay. Hold on. This is what we're going to do. Before I continue reading, let me go ahead. I'm going to add something really quick. And then we will continue on. That one's nice and big, so everyone should be able to see it, hopefully. Little correction so that we can make sure anyone who comes on is fully aware. Thank you so much for the suggestions. I'm very grateful. Thank you. I will go in also on the YouTube video later, and I will make appropriate adjustments so everyone is aware. Now, where were we? Yesterday was such a blur of motion and fading pictures. He walked slowly to the pot and stopped as he neared what should have been a counter covered in dishes and mess. There wasn't a single dirty bowl or cup. The kitchen was clean and the sink was empty. Had he been that high? Did he get up and clean the kitchen only to return to the bathroom and fall asleep in a pool of vomit again? No, it didn't make sense. He opened his cupboard and pulled out one of the old clay-colored coffee mugs. He took careful steps and motions as he poured out a cup of coffee. It didn't smell burnt, so it can't be very old. It was pretty hot, too. With as much care as he could manage, he migrated to the living room and knelt down in front of the ashtray. His hands pawed about amongst the butts, looking for one with enough bite left in it to burn his lungs. "Can I offer you a cigarette not yet smoked?" I asked him, knowing that he wouldn't expect to hear anyone's voice here in his home. At first he paused and looked at the television, and then craned his head around to see me standing right behind him. "How the hell did you—" he asked me with all the confusion of a man who tried to understand how a person could be right next to them when they thought they were all alone. "Hell has nothing to do with a cigarette. So would you like one?" I asked him as sincerely as I could manage. He nodded, and he reached up to take the tiny gift from my hand. His eyes focused on me, and he got his first look at Destiny. A tall, well-groomed stranger wearing a deep scarlet three-piece suit and a black tie. His eyes wandered across my black wingtip shoes and my fingers covered in modest silver rings. A glance shot up to see black eyes, soft gray skin, and raven hair slicked back as men had done in years long gone. I know he saw more than a man because I wanted him to. "Thank you," he said meekly, as he put the cigarette in his lips. He began to search himself for a lighter when I struck the flint on a silver flip-top. He leaned forward, placing the end of his distraction into the flame, and then pulled hard to get as much smoke as he could into himself. I couldn't help but smile slightly at him. He's so innocent in his naivety. "Better?" I asked. "Much. Did you make coffee?" he asked in a strange way. "Yes, Courtney. I believe you could use the medicinal benefits of caffeine," I answered in earnest. He stared at me briefly and then turned his eyes down to the coffee mug, as if it held some secret that would answer his deeper questions. With little thought, he drank from the cup and took another drag off his cigarette. "How do you know my name? And how did you get in?" When he asked me, there was the slightest hint of anger in his voice. When I heard it, I couldn't help but smile. I crouched down to look at him, eye to eye. "I know everything about you, Courtney. It doesn't matter how I know, and to be blunt, you don't lock your balcony door." I answered with some delight. "This is the 5th fucking floor. How the hell did you get to my balcony?" Now he was getting more angry and confused. "I think we have more important business, Courtney. After all, you are a man who has just cheated death. I thought you, of all people, would be willing to be more adventurous in life and listen to what I have come for. And if nothing else, show some courtesy and say thank you for the coffee and cigarette." I masked my feelings with some humor. He looked at me, searching for some weakness in my hard facade, and took another long drag on his cigarette. "So who should I say thank you to?" He brought a smile to my face, and I couldn't help but start to grow fond of his ignorance. "My name is of no consequence, but what you can call me is friend." I waited patiently for his next question or comment. His manner and whole set of curious character defects served my purposes well. "Thank you, friend. So why are you here?" "I have come to give a dying man the chance to live, and all I ask in return is your assistance," I said in a sweet tone. He drank from his coffee cup again and finished off the cigarette. pushing its remains into the overburdened ashtray. "What do you mean, dying?" he asked in a weak voice. I pulled another cigarette out of my pocket and placed it between his lips. A quick strike of the flint, and soon the tip began to glow as he breathed in another harsh breath. "Courtney, my friend, as of last night, your name went on the naughty list. You tried to some small success to end your life. And if it wasn't for my generous spirit, you would be a bloated bath toy right now." I tried not to smile as I spoke. His eyes grew slightly watery, as if he could weep, but I had no time for that. A soft swallow and another deep puff on his cigarette, and he lowered his eyes to the floor. Am I dead?" "Not quite, Courtney. You are, as of this moment, bordering on death, and I promise that as long as you assist me, I will not let you die. Which, of course, will give you time to make nice with the universe and not end up a damned soul." He took another drag from his cigarette and seemed to choke a bit. I could tell he was mulling it all over in his head, trying to piece together the terrible little puzzle that had been thrown in his undeserving lap. I can't be sure if he was the right choice, but I can be certain he will make the right choice for my plans. "What are you?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the floor. I sat down on the floor in front of him and ran my fingers through his filthy blonde hair, caressing him as if he was my own child. I pulled my warmest smile out for this, and lifted his chin to look into his eyes. "At this moment, I'm your angel of mercy. I, and I alone, can give you the chance to wash this ugliness from your soul." As I spoke, his eyes quivered with tears. He was mine now, and would follow my commands with hardly a second thought. In a sad way, it was all too easy to ensnare the heart for my needs. It was hard to imagine I second-guessed the judgment here. "What do you—" He began to speak as I placed my finger over his lips. I gave him a small hush sound, and he bit back on his tongue. "You need not do a thing for me yet. I will allow you some time to enjoy life and get your strength back. And when you are recovered, I will come back for you. Until then, you can do whatever your heart desires." I tried to be sweet as I stood up from the floor. I pulled a plain silver money clip out of my suit jacket and dropped it on the floor in front of him. He looked at it for a moment, like it was some alien artifact, and then looked back to me. "There is enough money there for you to do whatever you like. Just don't piddle it all away on more drugs, unless that's what you want to do with the last days you have." He leaned forward to take the money clip, and by the time he looked back up, I was gone from his sight, leaving him alone to escape the bonds of sadness and live as a man reborn, even as temporary as it might be. My hope was that he would live more in the next few brief moments than he ever had before, and thus would be overjoyed to see me again. One can only plan so much, though, so my influence on his life would be less controlled than I could hope. He sat there on the floor for some time, drinking at a sorrowful coffee mug and looking at everything around him with a new sense of wonder. As he finished his coffee, he stood and made his way back to the bathroom. Draining the tub, he prepared himself for a nice cleansing shower. Pulling off his mottled pants, he stepped into clear waters and proceeded to push his hair forward into the streaming fountain. As the shower head poured away its contents, he attempted to wash away the despair that he had felt the previous evening. All the dark little corners of his past fell away from him like dead skin. He'd never felt so relieved to be alive. This was to be his rebirth in so many ways. The hot water opened the wounds from the razor blade, and his body began to weep out velvety red streams of bad memory. He stood in the water until all the warmth had left it, and the shower began to become a stinging cold storm. With a few quick twists, the water stopped, and he stepped out, avoiding his pools of sick. He returned to look in the mirror so he could brush his hair and then his teeth. Careful steps out of the bathroom, and he ventured into the catacomb that was supposed to be a bedroom. He crossed the room and slid open a nearly hidden closet. Almost without thought, he pulled out a white hanging garment bag and unzipped the side. Steady-handed motions removed the black suit jacket and pants. Another pawing in the closet, and he produced from its recesses a white Egyptian cotton button-down shirt and a golden yellow tie. Anticipation was high, and his heart beamed with a new kind of glory. There was no turning back from what had been done, so he felt that his life should have more meaning from here on out. He slipped his feet into crisp leather shoes with nimble fingers tied waxed laces. As he tied his shoes, he took note of how long his nails seemed. It only made sense to clip them before he stepped back into the world. Another trip into the bathroom. He opened his medicine cabinet and grabbed the clippers. As he snipped the ends away from his fingernails, a slight gleam caught his eyes. Sitting there on the sink's edge was the sinister needle that once held his perfect poison. In a moment of curious reflection, he picked it up and dropped it in the toilet. He looked into the mirror and pushed his hair back. His eyes hadn't been so clear in a long time. They seemed a shade darker than they used to be, though, and he wasn't sure if it was just the fact that he hadn't really seen himself in so long. He adjusted his tie and played with the collar of his shirt for a moment, and then moved down the hall toward the living room. For a moment the hall seemed so long, as if a moment of horizontal vertigo had afflicted his vision. In a second it wore off, and he was in the living room, looking down at the money clip next to the ashtray. As he leaned down to pick it up, a flash of last night attacked his mind. He could feel the water over his face and the silent swishing of the deep. His veins burned with the lingering feeling of narcotic bliss, and he felt the overwhelming darkness bite into his vision. As his fingers wrapped around the money clip, suddenly, and with a touch of jarring disorientation, he leapt back into the present. He fell down to his knees, and for a time felt the weariness in his body like a set of cinder blocks on his back. After a few deep breaths, he found strength to stand, and he placed the money clip in his pants pocket. Oh. I will say, it is nice to be able to read this long and actually just get this much of the story out in one go. I am putting that link again in chat. So if you would like to pick up a copy of Without the Light Volume 1, it is available through Amazon, and it should also still be available. It was, I will have to double check, but it should be available on the Barnes & Noble's website, as well as Parnassus Books. Should you decide to pick up a copy, I would so very much appreciate a review, and I always encourage a little snap of a picture and a share on social media. Not even all that far into this story, but there's so much that comes up when I read it. Feelings, thoughts, associations. Courtney Rubel is a complicated character, and his history and much of his characterization is rooted in a lot of reality. to take just a brief moment. This isn't something that necessarily is a subject of conversation very often, but the opening, the meeting of Courtney Rubel is, of course, very difficult to hear, to read, and it could be very difficult for some of you listening right now, or in the future when you watch this video. And I would like to say that, unfortunately, the story in the bathtub is based off true events. And I would like to take a moment to interject from reading and say that if you have feelings like this, if you have urges or thoughts or drives that might push you in a direction or give you pause to consider finality, there are many places out there that can help. There are many different helplines. So most certainly there are crisis centers, there are help hotlines, there are websites where you can actually chat now, so you don't have to actually speak if you're someone who has trouble actually getting on the phone to talk to someone. Should you need to speak to someone, do understand there are a lot of people out there who will listen, who will help, and reach out. You don't have to feel alone with that. Especially now, there are so many ways for us to contact so many people. So, a final solution is not a solution. And you will find yourself much happier if, or at least more comfortable, if you can speak. Thank you so much in chat. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, if you need to speak to someone, go ahead, speak to someone. Don't let it sit, and don't let it overcome you. This is what I'm going to do right here. Oh. I had it and then I lost it. That's what happens sometimes, right? Of course. I'm just going to get that right out of here. I was going to put it up there nice so everyone could read it, but oh goodness. All right. Tried to get that to work. Sometimes it doesn't. I will also say really quick, I really like being able to use OBS to do this, but sometimes it has issues with me trying to do things like show comments, stuff like that, so do bear with me. Now, I'm just going to have one more little sip. We're going to read on a little bit further. I hate to interrupt reading with stories, but there really is so much of this that has a root in my life and my experiences. And I've made some really intentional choices with some things. Even obviously the name of the main character was an exceptionally intentional choice. Which I might get into more in a little bit, but thank you so much in chat, Best Mod, and also just an absolutely wonderful person. Whew. I will also go ahead and I will put this out right now before we get much further on. Courtney Rubel's name, there's a lot of meaning. There's a lot of meaning in the name total, but of course Courtney's name and the fact that Courtney is a man are meant to be incongruent. They do not match. There are very few instances that you will ever find a man named Courtney, but it is rooted in the concept of trans identity and also the disconnection between who we are and how we are seen. Courtney is a man, and Courtney has a woman's name, and when I get a little further on, there are some moments where he brings it up in regards to the fact that he is aware of the disconnection and obviously has already suffered some troubles in his earlier life because of this. But I cannot begin to talk about all the different things that could be covered in the beginning of this. The dissection alone would take some time, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's trans identity and the perception of trans individuals, whether it's thoughts of self-harm or acts of self-harm, whether it is further actions beyond that. And then, of course, so many other things, the states of mental disorientation and inherent aspects of depression. I might need an entire extra show just to break down all the things and all the subjects that I discuss through fiction in the first part of this book, because it's a lot. And I've already gone off on a tangent, so right now we have the absolute best assistance in crisis prevention, intervention, phone numbers, centers, lines. Thank you so much. You are amazing. Appreciate it so much. Oh, God. This all means so much to me, and I could go off on a completely different subject right now, but let me just remind everyone who may be watching, listening, whenever you are, whether it's right now or in the future, there are people out there who want to listen to you, who want to support you, who will support you, and who will help you, and who will treat you better than those who may have treated you not so good in life. Whether they were peers or friends or members of your family or someone you should have trusted as an authority figure. It doesn't matter who it is if they have treated you poorly in any way or they have made you feel invisible in any way or they have just not listened to your problems or to your truth. There are people out there who will listen and who will help. All right. Now, I'm going to read a little bit more of this before we're done today. All right. After a few deep breaths, he found strength to stand, and he placed the money clip in his pants pocket. Turning himself away from the sliding glass door, he walked to his apartment door and departed from his living mortuary. An elevator sat a few feet down the hallway, but he walked all the way down to the corridor, to the stairwell. The stairs offered the promise and gift of knowing where you are and what you are doing. After all, the exercise could do him good. A few flights of stairs, and he found himself in the lobby of the apartment building. Then a short walk away, and he was pushing open the large glass door. He hadn't ever appreciated his surroundings the way he did now, but everything held some new allure for him. Even the noise of the city streets and the smell of too many people and cars for just such a small amount of usable space. The air was acrid and the daylight was almost overwhelming. How long had he been locked away in his apartment, dying inside while he plotted how he would die entirely? He wasn't sure really, and now it didn't matter. Everything that he felt was out of his reach before now was something he felt he could grab hold of and keep for his own. Though a good start would be grabbing a taxi and something to eat. He could hardly remember the last time he ate something more substantial than toast or microwave dinners. He stepped towards the curb and put up his hand to hail a taxi, and in a moment, a little yellow and white city van pulled to his aid. A squatty-looking man with bad teeth and a pitted fat nose ushered Courtney to get in, and then asked him where to go. "Where's we headed, business class?" The cabbie asked with an accent so garbled it was hard to tell where he came from. "The Cromwell Hotel. I recall they had a nice steakhouse there," Courtney said back to him. The cabbie looked back at Courtney for a moment, then laughed in a kind of snorty way. "Cromwell closed down, business class, but I'd take you to a place just as nice. It's my cousin's favorite. You'll like it," the cabbie said and began to speed off down the road. Courtney leaned back in his seat and sighed. He'd liked the Cromwell when he still had the money to go there. Curiosity crept in as he wondered why it closed. It had always been so popular. At one point in time, he had played piano there with a house band every weekend, though that was a few years back now. "What's your name?" he asked the cab driver. "Zenevieve. But if you have a hard time, you call me Zen. Every other speaks to me Zen. Zen you drive too fast, Zen you forget my birthday, Zen you need a shower, so you call me Zen. We can be buddies, yeah?" the cabbie said with an overstated bit of humor. "Well, Zen, it occurs to me that I'm eating alone, and I haven't had a buddy in a long time. Do you have time to take a break from driving and eat?" Courtney asked him, a little taken back by the fact that he'd even said it. Why did he just ask this guy to eat with him? It was hard to place the why, but why not ask? After all, his life had been lived so poorly, and now he had the chance to take some risks. "You want for me to eat with you, business class?" "I make my own hours, so I eat when I want. You gonna pay?" Zenevieve said to him with another snorting laugh. Courtney leaned forward and smiled to the cab driver. "I will pay. All you have to do is eat with me," he said to Zen with as much kindness as he had to give. Zenevieve looked back for a moment and shrugged. As he pulled into the parking lot of a rather posh-looking brick building, Courtney wondered if the money clip actually did have enough cash for some adventure. "We're here business class. Bourbon Company. It's a good place. You'll like it." As Zenevieve spoke, he tapped the meter to give a little heads up to pay. Courtney pulled out the money clip and handed over a bit too much cash, but like it really mattered. His life was too valuable for him to be concerned with how much he spent on a cab ride. "Come on, Zen. Let's get ourselves something to eat," he said with some happiness. As the two men got out of the cab, it was all too apparent that they didn't seem to have anything in common more than the fact that they were both breathing. Not like it was all that important. After all, any company is better than no company. They walked through the entrance as if they were old friends, and were greeted with some suspicious glances from the host. He, however, did well to put his best friendly facade on as he saw Courtney putting the loaded money clip back into his pants pocket. He took their number and led them to an out-of-the-way booth near the bar. It wasn't as if he didn't want to give them a nice seat, but he felt some of the other diners might not be so impressed. The two men sat down with a little concern as to the positioning of their booth, and really it wasn't something to be concerned about. They ordered drinks, a double scotch for Courtney, and a pint of house beer for Zenevieve, and then they waited for their waiter to return. "What's your name, business class?" Zen asked. "Courtney. And please, no jokes." "Is this not a woman's name?" Zen jabbed back at him. "So I have been told, but it was my grandfather's name, so I guess I should be proud to have it. It's a good name, it's a family name. Mine was my father's before me," Zenevieve said. The two seemed to be getting along well, and after their drinks arrived, they had already gained some camaraderie. A pair of steaks were ordered, as well as 2 more drinks before they had touched their first. As Zenevieve began eating out of the bread basket that had arrived, he continued with the small talk. "What do you do for a job?" Zenevieve asked with half a roll in his mouth. "I used to be a pianist, but I haven't played in a long time," Courtney said with some sadness. Zenevieve nodded along as if he understood the loss and stuffed more bread into his mouth. "So you were good, yes?" "I was, once." "Why is it you do not play now?" Zen asked, hoping to learn more. Courtney rolled back the last of his scotch and grabbed a roll as he considered his response. Zenevieve pushed back the tail end of his first beer and waited. He knew the answer wouldn't be easy. "Guess I stopped playing around the same time that my bandmates told me to sober up or move on. They were right to be firm with me, but I guess I didn't have the frame of mind to understand that they cared about me. Closed them all out. Spent all the money I'd saved over the years and just lost touch." Zenevieve listened and took a moment to process. The waiter arrived with their new drinks, the steaks, and another bread basket. It served nicely to break the silence that passed between the new friends. "Courtney, a man is more a man when he can see his mistake." Oof. Sat that down momentarily. I find myself very warm. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for enjoying this time with me, sharing this time with me. I always like to be able to share what I've created and share my thoughts and share what I've made with all of you. Even though sometimes it can be difficult to read certain things back. Some days are easier, some days are harder. As it turns out, today is on the more difficult end. But that is how it goes sometimes. We'll step back for a second and actually say Xenove is also based off a friend that I had a long time ago who was an interesting person. And sometimes a memory will hit you and you just gotta laugh. Or at least just grin as you think about where you were when you had those thoughts or did those things. This story goes many places after this, and some of them are easier and some of them are harder. But there is an adventure that comes, and I would like to invite all of you to join me again on a different book night where we will continue reading, and I'm going to be making this a series of videos where we will get together and we will continue on with the story of Without the Light Volume 1. Now, Volume 2 is currently available as an ebook, and it will be available as a paperback and hardcover in the near future. Both these books have been re-released, and there is so much more coming. There are other very interesting characters, and there is a whole lot to unpack. You know, when you have a fantasy series, especially a multi-book, yes, of course a multi-book. If it's a series, it's going to be multi-book. I'm silly. But if you have a fantasy series, especially one with a very large world like I have been creating for a long time now, there's a lot to be introduced to, so I really hope that you come along this journey because we are going to be going some interesting places together. And I'm so glad that you're curious. And, of course, Without the Light, Volume 1 and Volume 2, even though available, Volume 3, it's going to be some time before that comes out. But there is also the second series, related, but not necessary to read if you need to know everything in here, but it does help. There's also In Absentia. Now, In Absentia and its follow-up book Obscurus, that's part of a novella series that takes place in New Amsterdam, which is currently where we are with Courtney and Xenove. We're in New Amsterdam. However, the In Absentia series is a much darker and a much more difficult read. So if you have issues with things like violence or very... there's so many bad ways to say it. If you have issues with things that are any more difficult than what we just went through, then perhaps read In Absentia with that in mind. Or, of course, you can always just share it with someone else who you think might be able to read it with less issue. And yes, I do have stories on Kindle Vella. There are currently two series on Kindle Vella. 30 Days in the Apocalypse with Dr. Ciencio Magnifico, post-apocalyptic sci-fi comedy focusing on internet celebrities and it gets humorous and it gets a bit absurd, and it's delightful. There is also Daydreams, a lady-to-lady love story, also available on Kindle Vella. And each one of those, they're just starting, so there will be more episodes available for those in the future. But I'm also going to be re-releasing all of my previous novels and novellas, so do stay tuned. I will give information out about all of that as it becomes available. So just keep in mind, new stuff is coming, interesting stuff is coming, old stuff is being re-released, that ranges from high fantasy to sci-fi to darker, gritty, more crime fiction. There's a lot of different topics and subjects I write about. But what I can tell you is most of it takes place in the Great Web. Some of it does not. So it will be up to you to sort that out. See if you can find the tie-ins, the little nods and clues. Though I will just be honest, 30 Days in the Apocalypse does not take place in the Great Web. Neither do some of the other stories that I'm working on that are not out yet. So, thank you everyone for being here. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful weekend. I will give news in a post to let you know when the next book night will be, though we might be doing more of them because I have started doing my art workshops monthly, so I might be doing more book nights and less art nights, just with the art workshops coming up. We'll see how that's going to go. It's only the first quarter of the year gone. We're into a new quarter, so we're going to see how everything goes. But ever-changing, ever-evolving, ever-growing. Oh, thank you for popping in. Definitely catch you on the replay. Ooh, I apologize. I've been meaning to put my microphone on a hotkey so I can just turn it off quickly. I haven't done that yet. I'm going to do that next time. That way we have it nice and simple and I can just click a key. Oh. But thank you so much for everyone being here. Do consider attending one of my art workshops. Please come back for another book night. And if you pick up a copy of Without the Light, I will be so very thankful. And I just ask, please leave a review. Reviews help authors so very much in so many ways. And a review can sometimes help sell more books than an ad. And I know that sounds a little selfish, but, oftentimes we rely on the opinions of others. And we just close ads and say, bye-bye, I don't want to see you. All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Be excellent. You have a great night. I have a cat that's popped up behind me. Oh, cat. Oh. Pointed over the wrong shoulder. All right. Be excellent, everyone. I'll see you all again real soon. Thank you for being here.